People who dated a daddy's little princess or a mama's boy, what was the last straw that made you say nah, I'm out of here? Story 1. His mom had a key to our apartment, and she would just use the key to enter the apartment without even knocking during any time of the day. She'd also jump into his bed if he's in the bed, and cuddle with him. We were 26. Story 2. For a while back in high school, I was dating this guy and his mom kept telling him I wasn't pretty enough for him and he deserved a girl who was really pretty, like a cheerleader or something. He was a pretty average-looking 90s boy with bleached blonde hair. I was an alt-girly. We weren't totally mismatched but maybe a little, I guess. Anyway, if I called the house to chat with him, she'd either not answer the phone or lie and say he wasn't around. He called back a few times and apologized for his mom being a. Once I heard her say, "Why haven't you dumped her and found your princess yet?" After a while it just got annoying. The relationship eventually fizzled out, and he ended up dating someone else. She actually called me one time and asked how did you deal with his mom. Story 3. Got invited out to lunch with just his mom. I thought to get to know me one-on-one. No, she started by saying anything she says can be shared with her son. She doesn't want secrets. Then the bullshit starts. Do I know his friends don't like me? Do we wear condoms? I told X about it after. He brings it up to her. She says she never said any of it and I'm a liar. He believed her. Thank God she showed me what I was getting into before it was too late. Story 4. He had just purposely, on accident, no-showed a flight that I paid for him. I was asking why he didn't make arrangements when he's known the flight times for 2 months. I was sobbing, but instead of trying to console me, he gave the phone to his mama and never apologized or paid me back for the flight. Todd, you're still on my shit list for the no-show flights. Story 5. I had a heart attack the Friday before Mother's Day. He still left me in the hospital, alone, and drove 3 hours to go have dinner with his mother, even though there was already a Mother's Day dinner planned for that Sunday. His mom always had to make sure I knew that she was one and his presence there was more important than being with me in the hospital and making any decisions if I was incapacitated. You know it's bad when the nurses are handing you slips of paper with divorce attorney's contact information before you discharge. Yes, I left him. The kicker is, once she got the grandchildren she wanted from X's brother, she no longer pays any attention to X. Story 6. We wanted to plan a holiday together. I had some suggestions of where to go and asked him for his. He said he didn't know and he'd have to ask his mom what he'd like. Story 7. When he didn't tell me his mother was driving 2 hours to rip me a new one about how I wasn't good enough for her son, that's when I knew for absolute certain that he loved her more than me, and that's not what a marriage is about. Don't worry, we called it off and I only lost the deposit on the venue. Story 8. I had meningitis and was lying in bed trying not to die, and he still begged me to make him boxed orange chicken you just stick in the oven because he didn't know how. Story 9. He used to send pictures of me to his mom for her to judge how I was dressed. He wanted her opinion on everything. Of course that kind of behavior doesn't come alone, there were plenty, so I ran TF away. Story 10. He was arrested for assault and she asked me what I did to provoke him. Yeah, you raised a violent thug who beat up his sister before they were out of their teens and 20 years later he hadn't learned a thing. His sister now lives 6,000 miles from her parents and only sibling. Story 11. My ex and I didn't live together before marriage. His parents were really religious and wouldn't approve of it and I was young, 23 and extremely dumb. I figured we'd been together like 8 years and it would be fine. I realized quickly that he expected me to do everything. The shopping, the cooking, the dishes, the laundry, clean, etc. He once asked me while we were eating dinner again, one I had shopped for and cooked, if I could get up and get him a glass of water. I had no idea his mom was doing literally everything for him at home and that's what he was expecting of me as well. When I tried pointing out that his mom was a stay-at-home mom with no job, and therefore more available to help with things like shopping and laundry, whereas I had a full-time job making 3 times the money he was and that I basically paid all our bills myself, he started screaming at me that I was questioning his manhood and he wouldn't stand for it. I was not having it. Then he started shoving me around and tried to kill my kitten. So there's that. I'm now happily married to my husband of 10 years that does everything for himself, cooks, cleans, does our laundry, dishes, etc., and is best friends with a now 14-year-old cat. Story 12. When we got home from the first time I met his parents, we lived a long way apart and were engaged by that point, and he got a very long, very dramatic call from his mother about how she disapproves of me and they wouldn't be at the wedding, and he didn't fight her, he called it off. Dude was 40-ish at the time. I knew he was close to them but I had no idea he was such a mama's boy. Bullet dodged. Story 13. I literally married outside of my culture instead of dealing with a mama boy. I am from a patriarchal culture where semi-arranged marriages are still common, and all men are babied by their mothers. I had a guy's family come ask my parents to marry me and I literally left home within a month to get out of it, and was disowned by my family. They didn't talk to me for almost 3 years. I met my now husband during that time. They eventually got over me leaving and now adore my husband, but right from the start I knew I didn't want to marry a mama's boy from my culture or any culture. Been with my husband 14 years, married for 10 now. Super happy with my husband that knows how to be an adult all in his own. Story 14. His mom packed him a lunch when we were heading out for the day. Just him, she didn't pack anything for me. Then she texted him almost the whole time and he answered every one. Story 15. Mama's boy. He wouldn't talk to me about any of our relationship issues. Instead he'd go to his mother and she'd tell him what I should do, who I should be. I met the woman once for 5 minutes. He was also unemployed. I paid he bills, cleaned house, laundry, bills, cooked, he sat around figuring things out. Yet, I wasn't good enough as I did not have a PhD. He has one. He now lives off his family without a job. He is late 40s. Story 16. We had broken up, gotten back together a few times. So my last straw actually happened after we had broken up for what was to be the last time. This was right after college, so we were 22-23. We had been planning our wedding and I had been asking him for months for a guest list for his side. He kept saying that his mom was working on it and I kept asking him to please ask her for it. In one of our discussions after the breakup, he told me that his mom had been waiting for me to ask her for the list, and if I had just asked, she would have given it to me, and she saw it as an insult that I wouldn't ask her directly. It was in that moment that I realized it was never going to be us versus the problem. It was going to be me versus him. Whenever we had a disagreement, and any lingering feelings about getting back together evaporated. Story 17. We were 19 and dating for a year. He ghosted me for like a week or two, out of the blue. We didn't fight or anything. Initially I thought something bad happened, but when the days passed with him not answering my calls, I figured he was too of a coward to break up with me, so I decided to move on. After 2 weeks he calls and shows up at my work begging for forgiveness. I agreed to see him to get answers. Turns up his mom told him to do that, but he couldn't keep up with it because he loved me so much and missed me. Yeah, I was so done. Story 18. We started dating when I was 16 and he was 26. Looking back, that should have been reason enough, but I was a stupid teenager. It took me about 3 years to figure out that he was controlling and jealous. He was unemployed, but I had school, a job, and did all the cooking and cleaning. So he started inviting over his mom so that there was an impartial mediator to help us through our issues. It didn't take me long to figure out that it was just him and his mom trying to convince me that all our issues were my fault. It made me realize that as a stupid 19-year-old, I was the more adult one in the relationship. It really helped me flip a switch and made me realize all the other issues we had weren't actually all my fault. Story 19. He consulted his family and came back with a bulleted list. I think there were at least 5 items of everything he and his mom hated about me. Literally a performance improvement plan consisting of everything he and her wanted me to do better in the relationship. Story 20. As I sat there getting screamed at by her mother, she looked across the table at me, and in her eyes I could see nothing but utter shame and an apologetic, pleading stare. She knew what was happening was wrong, that I was, and had been for some time, treated like by her mother, and even then in that moment she said nothing. Completely silent. Story 21. My ex-boyfriend had to hold my hand and his mom's hand an equal amount any time we went anywhere. He would be holding my hand and then halfway through whatever we were doing he would go hold his mom's hand for the rest of. Story 22. Not a mama's boy but a daddy's boy. Came back to residence one afternoon at university only to hear loud sobbing coming from the room across from me. The door was ajar, so I peeked in to see if the 6'4", 280 pounds football player was okay. He was inconsolable. I assumed a death in the family and tried to console him. When he finally stopped bawling he choked out that he had lost his wallet and couldn't get his dad on the phone to tell him what to do. A few questions later and we figured out that he may have left it in his football locker, where we found it. Story 23. I dated a guy in university whose parents lived in the Middle East. His mom would call constantly to check in on him. This was back in the mid-2000s and he still had an answering machine. He kept the answering machine on the setting where you could hear the message being left by the person calling. So literally every night between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. she didn't bother taking the time difference into consideration. There'd be at least 1 or 2 calls and then the sound of her screeching for him to pick up the phone in Urdu. That was bad enough. But then she decided to move in with US for just a few months, and that was the last straw. Story 24. Buckle up. It's not quite the thing, but similar enough. This guy told people we were dating, but really he was my boss, I found out later, and he was bizarrely enmeshed with both parents. The first time I met his parents, it was a surprise dinner at his family's house. I thought we were picking some stuff up. Not only was it a surprise family dinner, with all his relatives, they sprang it on me that Head told them my mother had been abused by my dad. Yikes, dude. And rather than offering sympathy or concern, they launched into a long, intense tirade about how my mother was just as much scum as my father, for allowing her children to exist in that environment. Never mind that he hospitalized her to prevent her from escaping, but we still got away, or that he broke the arm of a police officer when she called the cops and they still let him out the next day and even gave him a ride home. It was tremendously awful. I was aghast for so many reasons. So I said what I could, but mostly stayed quiet, because we were off in some suburb, an hour away from anywhere I could get a taxi home, and after I told the guy I never wanted to see his parents again, to let me know if they were coming into the office, so I could hide or something. He said he understood completely, but then manufactured a situation where I was, again, isolated in a place I couldn't leave on my own, as well as locked in. I thought it was a mistake, but then his parents unlocked the door and came in. They wouldn't leave me alone and both wanted me to hug them to show that I accepted their apology, which by the way they did not give. So I ended up standing there, stiffly saying, "Please don't touch me," while these 2 people, twice my age, draped themselves over me. They kept saying, "We're not bad people, just call me Mom, Dad, just say we're all okay now," and well, Eve, it felt like I was in a sketchy alternative reality. If I hadn't really needed that job, I would have left that day and never been seen again. Sadly, I stuck it out for several months and no, it never got better. Story 25. My ex had a weird thing on his and I said, "You should probably go to the doctor." And he said, "No, I'm just gonna go show my mom real quick." you know she touched it to get a proper look. Story 26 He would call his mom every day. It wasn't that big of a red flag at first. One time she called in the middle of our date and they proceeds to talk in their native language for 20 minutes while I just sat there. He would ask his mom's opinion on everything. Can't seem to make any decision for himself, as small as whether or not he should buy new gloves. I found out his mom was calling him by the cheesy nickname between us. The last straw was that he said he wouldn't go to my home country because his mom made him promise not to. Story 27 At 20 years old, his mom didn't want him spending the night with his girlfriend me. He decided to do it anyway because he was an adult. We went out to dinner that night and I got a text from my roommate that his mom was literally camped in the lobby of our apartment building, buzzing our bell, screaming at my roommate that he was lying and we actually were in there and that she would sit and wait until we eventually had to leave the apartment. Between this she was non-stop calling my boyfriend and me. We stayed out until like midnight, then slowly drove past my apartment to make sure she wasn't still there. It didn't last very long after that. Story 28 She took his sandwich which she had made into the kitchen to add salad cream because she knows how I like it. Also she spoon-fed him some medicine. He was 38 at the time. Story 29 This actually happened after our breakup, but I think it belongs here. While we were dating ID let him borrow my car to get to work or band practices. It was an older car and I had a few specific rules about using it because it couldn't be pushed too hard. He ignored those rules and upped my car multiple times, causing breakdowns and then bitched about having to pitch in for repairs. This isn't really relevant but it does showcase his sense of entitlement anyway. Once we finally broke up his mom bought him a car since he couldn't afford his own and obviously couldn't use mine anymore. Dude was near 30 and couldn't even afford to buy himself a clunker to get around. I became friends with his next ex after me. He's in but honestly has great taste in women, and turns out he wrecked that car and mommy dearest bought him another, which he also wrecked. Story 30 It was his 29th birthday dinner. We met up with his mom and her partner for a casual dinner. She brought a small round cake pre-made and a candle. We sang happy birthday. He blew out the candle. She used her index finger to swipe up some rogue frosting that was on the plastic plate holding the cake. She raised her index finger and the frosting toward him. He took the finger into his mouth and when it re-emerged there was no frosting. Did he it off? Swirl his tongue around her finger? I will never know. Story 31 I dated a mama's boy. I was up for a promotion at my job and he somehow made it about himself and finally said, "My mom wouldn't like you, you're too independent." I had to ask him to clarify because this was over a job promotion I worked my butt off for. And he said, "She would want you to not care about a job promotion and want you to be more domestic for me." I said cool, and left. Story 32 He didn't cook, didn't clean, didn't work, stayed up all night arguing with 12-year-olds on Call of Duty and sleeping all day while I was at work, and said I want you to fold my clean socks the way my mom does it. Story 33 When he thought he could have a girlfriend and I'd just be okay with it since his mama was. She always hated me. BC I would talk about them being so weird together. They had a grossly weird relationship and still do. He still lives with his mama, he's 36, and married with a kid. His parents pay his bills, buy him vehicles, fight his fights. I wasn't raised to depend on people doing stuff for me. Story 34 Despite the fact that my almost MIL was disabled and unable to clean, my ex-fiancé did not clean the bathroom. I gave them a heads up that I would clean the bathroom and proceeded to clean it. Despite the fact that I took initiative, the woman criticized my work instead of her lazy son. Story 35 Lots of little things like my mom does to us in this way, that I shouldn't have ignored but did, but she showed high on something to our wedding to help her deal with him leaving. Mama S-boy, typical of me doing all the cooking and cleaning being the grown-up while he sat around and did nothing. Then he spent the weekend at mommy's house and then wasn't answering my calls or texts. Finally, he did answer and said we had to break up. No explanation. No reason at all. I was leaving class when this happened, and by the time I got home he was gone, and so was all his. Found out weeks later, his mom told him to do it because I was ruining his life. Meanwhile, I was in school for nursing, and he was working retail with no future plans. Now I've been working as a nurse for 10 years, and last I heard from mutual friends, he still loves with mommy at a dead-end job. But man you Nate for not being man enough to face me and leaving me to pay rent by myself. Have the life you deserve. Story 36 The last person I dated before meeting my husband needed so badly to remove his from his mother's purse. She had opinions about me that honestly I can live with, but they changed the way he treated me. Suddenly, the two of them were having monthly meetings in public places that I was not allowed to attend, but he refused to leave me at home so had forced me to come with him into town. Then I was required to walk around town with no money, no way home, and not allowed into the business they were having their meeting in. I was also not allowed to bring anything to keep me entertained. No book, no crochet, no headphones, nothing. I started organizing my escape after the first meeting. I'm happy to say I was able to leave with most of my belongings. I moved cross-country, met my husband, and while things aren't perfect I'm happy. Hubby and I are about to celebrate 18 years married. Story 37 I wasn't a daddy's little princess by any means, but my dad would call on his way over to pick me up for breakfast on Saturday or Sunday mornings at like 8 a.m. after I moved back to the same city after college. This was never prearranged or agreed upon. He'd just say, "Hey, your mom and I are on the way to pick you up for breakfast." I was usually hungover and had my eventual husband in bed with me. I often told him no, I didn't want breakfast, but he rarely listened. so I'd have to drag myself out of bed hungover, and go eat. Finally one day, I had enough, said no. He kept insisting and I finally said, Papa, I have a guy in my bed and am not going to breakfast. He apologized and hung up. He called me later to tell me how inappropriate it was for me to share that information and that he was my father and didn't need to know that. I reminded him that I told him no many times and if he would just listen, he wouldn't hear uncomfortable things. He started reaching out the night before to see if I wanted to meet for breakfast and always accepted the first no after that. Story 38, slightly different take where I realized I was the problem. I grew up with a family that was incredibly close. Me and my mom were like Rory and Lorelai Gilmore. I told her everything, and it was expected that I didn't ever keep things to myself. I told her about my partner, the things that frustrated me, our disagreements or highs and lows, a bit about our intimate life, and I didn't realize how far I often took it, because it just was expected. It has taken a lot of unlearning and unenmeshing myself from this dynamic. Realizing that it wasn't fair to my partner to have our relationship be so open with my mom. He was in a relationship with me, not her. Thankfully my partner has been super patient, and I have been in regular therapy counseling not just about this, but for other family-related healing, which has really helped me to grow and heal. Story 39, I found out his mom was buying the condoms we use. He used to get so excited when he'd bring over flavored ones or ribbed ones to try. I ended it once I figured out it was his mom getting them for him the whole time to make sure he was being safe. Story 40, he always dragged his mom into our arguments so she could side with him in the argument. Then if she and I went somewhere together she'd be on my side. Final straw was when he decided to mix alcohol with his medication and pointed a knife at me. She took his side. That sent me into a spiral where I lost 2 to 3 months of time. When I came back to reality, I had meticulously and somehow secretly separated his stuff from my stuff and had it ready to be moved out. I had enough stuff that it filled a long-wheel trailer and 3 cars. I had packed it so well it took us 6 hours and 1 trip to get it all out. Best thing I ever did for myself. Story 41, another fight about how we had no savings because he refused to do any kind of work and I told him that if I ever lost my job, we'd lose the house. His response, my mom won't let that happen. We were in our 30s and his mom was his only backup plan. Story 42, my ex would call his mom weekly to drive 1 hour to his flat to clean it and take his dirty laundry with her. With every visit, she gave him last week's laundry back, all cleaned and ironed. He was 30 years old and absolutely capable of doing these things on his own. He even owned a washing machine and a dryer. His argument, his mom wants to do it and he didn't want to take this fun from her, not even when I moved in with him. It was so embarrassing. He even was mad at me when I washed my own clothes. He wanted me to give it also to his mom. Story 43, when I was in high school, probably age 17 or 18, I was dating a guy a couple years older than me. The first only time I met his mom she was asking me what I was planning to study in college, and when I told her she said, good, you'll be able to financially support son. I don't know if he was a mama's boy or if she was giving me a warning, but after that I kept having nightmares that we were getting married and I eventually broke up with him. Story 44, we lived in another country and his mom would constantly have his little sister call him crying because we took a trip together and didn't visit her. She was like 7 and didn't have social media so his mom would see the photos, tell his sister we were traveling to see them, and then days later tell her we went somewhere else instead. His parents were both retired and could travel to where we lived for free but conveniently were always too busy to come visit. Story 45, sort of the opposite. My mother has never really liked any woman either my brother or I have dated. She finally came around to my wife after years of marriage. My mother and I did have a few knockdown drag out early on when my wife and I first got married. Mostly through fenders around totally mundane things like who was sitting next to whom at formal dinners. My mother was always trying to separate my brother and I from our spouses. It finally ended when I said I simply want come to Thanksgiving dinner of if I cannot sit next to my wife. Story 46, finally, my time has come. When I was 20 I dated a 27-year-old man whose mother felt I wasn't good enough for him, despite being in a highly esteemed private college, and not unattractive and kind and polite. He wasn't exactly a prime catch. I was young and dumb. He and I went out one night, dinner and a movie, and right as we parked in the movie theater lot his mother called his cell phone. She told him they were out of bread, he still lived at home and that he needed to go to the store and bring it to her. He told her she would have to go get it herself. As we were at the movie theater 45 minutes from home, she insisted and whined and cried, yet he resisted and hung up. 2 minutes later as we're walking into the theater she calls back. She heard a noise and she's scared. She wants him to come home and check out. She knows we're 45 minutes away. My ex told her to call the police if she's that scared, but she starts whining and crying. So guess what, he actually tells me we have to go. We leave the theater and I told him to just drop me off at home on his way by. We lasted a few more weeks. I don't know what TF I was thinking. Story 47, the stories I have would set this thread on fire, but I have to be careful for now. Without my permission, he added his mother to all of our joint accounts. I keep typing more and deleting someday. Story 48, he couldn't make time to see me during his holiday break home from college because he had to go grocery shopping with his mom, on the only day that I wasn't working. Story 49, there were 2, but I was stupid and thought the first was just because we lived with his mother for a little while. She did our laundry, OURS, as in was touching my dirty underwear and would not stop no matter how many times I asked. Then we moved into a place together and he strangled me in an argument. I ran while he locked himself in the bathroom. screaming about what I turned him into. Yes, he's back living with his mother. If you asked him, my bet is the time he had a fit that my dad was taking too long to fix my car properly so I would be safe on the road instead of quickly jerry-rigging a fix. My father wanting my safety made me a princess. Story 50. He cancelled long-standing plans, and I texted him to know I wasn't happy about it. His mom went through his phone and saw the text messages, called my house phone, asked my dad who answered to speak to me and then yelled at me over hurting her little boy's feelings. She used some pretty nasty insults. Apparently he regularly gave her access to her phone because they had no secrets. He was in his mid-20s and older than me, so it wasn't like he was a young teenager or something. Having the audacity to go through my father made it so much worse. My poor dad didn't know who it was when she called as she didn't identify herself. He thought it was my mum using a funny voice as a joke and was so guilty he didn't tell her to off when I later told him what happened. Story 51. His mother encouraged him to just go out and get your sucked when he complained to her that he wanted more. We were like 22 and like rabbits. There were also some really weird boundary issues with his younger sister too. 100 Backwoods Kentucky family edit. To add sister details, she was always at our place and I would come home to them cuddling on the couch in a very all over each other way when she was pregnant. She would demand he massage her belly, pretty much from underboob to just above the pubic area. Because no one else can do it as good, she tried to get him to leave the hospital when I was having surgery because she wanted to hang out and figured I would be fine because of the nurses. The kissing, never on the lips, but close enough that it wasn't much of a difference, sometimes lingering forehead kisses during goodbyes. I'm sure there's more that I don't remember between him, his mom, and his sister. All of this was over the course of 5 years, because I was stupid and gaslit myself into believing it was okay. Story 52. Pretty sure his mom wants to him, even his sister noticed. He says he doesn't see it, but I haven't left him. We just go no contact with her now. Heaven forbid I see her at a family event. I usually just don't go anymore. She's a disgusting creep. Knock it off, Patty, you're his mom. Story 53. His mom would constantly talk about this dream she had for the two of them to open a BB together in front of me with no mention of my involvement in the endeavor. We were engaged and he financed most of her life and his sister's life and a friend's life. He wasn't even that well off. Just the most well off and generous in the group, which at the time I appreciated. I finally woke up and realized that he was always going to put them before our relationship and would always take responsibility for their poor decisions at the expense of our financial future. Story 54. My ex-husband and I got married at City Hall and then had a small destination wedding of 16 guests for family etc. His parents, specifically his mom, said a few times, "Oh, but everyone wants to meet you. Why can't you have a big wedding blah blah." Our thought was there will be our whole lives for that stuff. We wanted a small wedding. We agreed to go back to his hometown shortly after to meet his extended family. Okay, great. She mentioned I should bring my wedding dress as people would want to see it, and I laughed it off like, no, I'm not going to go to dinner in a gown, thinking she was joking. When we went to dinner the first night, we pulled into a golf club and walked into basically a 200-person wedding. My wedding that I didn't know about, that she wanted me to wear my wedding dress for. It was so surreal. The whole experience was a blur. One of my ex's friends gave me a Xanax which helped all. I just remember not being able to glean from him if he knew what was happening or if he was also ambushed. But his vibe was, hey, it's already happening, let's roll with it, which I did do, but that was it. I knew I couldn't rely on him for anything. We got divorced 8 months later. His mom also used to do this horrible thing where when she hugged me she would do this breathy quivery little sigh into my ear like I was God's gift or something. It was so weird. Story 55. Not dated, but my ex-stepsister. She had grown up with luxury and privilege, very different from me, but I loved her like a sister and thought we were close. I made excuses for her truly awful behavior and ignored a lot because I wanted us to be sisters. The last straw was when she didn't get homecoming queen. She literally seduced the winner's father and was the catalyst for the girl's parents' divorce. The homecoming queen ended up having to love towns and the family lost their home in the divorce proceedings, over a dumb homecoming title. Story 56. My ex-husband separate for 10 years but finally goy through divorce. Total mum's boy. Ran home abducting my son because she told him to because I was a monster who God forbid wanted them to get a job while I was at nursing school and working, so 60+ hours a week in all. Stupidly got back together after they cut ties with mum, but the next time they got sectioned, got in touch with mummy, ran off again. I was done. She enabled the worst behaviors and blamed me on everything, and my ex hasn't seen their kids in 10 years. Story 57. When I was like 21 I dated a dude that was 24 and his mom wouldn't let him spend the night and wouldn't let me come over and threatened to turn off his phone and take away his car insurance if he did. Called me the whole time because her little baby was having an adult relationship. For our first Christmas he got me a poster, not a problem, and he got his mom a designer bag and Pandora bracelet. Like, just go date your mom already. Story 58. When his mother hugged me on my 16th and threatened to get me done for statutory rape if I ever touched her son again since I turned legal first despite both him and I being in the same year at school with only a few months been us. Story 59. It had already ended but the guy's mother called me up to shout at me because I had told the council he no longer lived at my address so I wouldn't have to pay for him, but hell have to pay. I'd been paying for this loser for 7 years and his mummy expected me to carry on paying after he left me for his affair partner. Story 60. He compared my cooking to his mom's every time. I'm not trying to beat your mom's lasagna. I just want you to eat dinner without critiquing it like MasterChef. Story 61. Me and my boyfriend at the time planned a cruise vacation early 20 right before the pandemic, and his mom and stepdad booked a cruise with us and decided to invite themselves. I paid a good chunk of change to spend some one-on-one time with him, and he decided to spend most of his time with his mother. Our relationship dwindled after that, and we only lasted a few more years together.